Thank you for attending. So this course is an overall worker safety presentation and will be posted online for viewing. Please note, this course is not providing any continuing education credits. This is a two-day presentation discussing worker safety. Day two's presentation will cover some of the same topics being discussed today. However, tune in tomorrow for the second part, as we will be going over new topics we couldn't fit in today. If you haven't registered for the second presentation, you still have time to do so. We have a lot of information to share with you today, and at the end of today's course, participants will become familiar with Local Law 196 of 2017. This is an overview of the safety training requirements. Review cases of near misses and tips on how to prevent them, and discuss construction-related incidences which resulted in an injury. We will cover case studies, their causes, and how to prevent them. We will also review construction-related incidences that resulted in a fatality. We will cover case studies, their causes, and how to prevent them as well. Over the years, we have collected data and have analyzed the trends to determine the top violations issues on construction sites. This section will be a general overview, and we will discuss the potential safety hazards and how to prevent them. And most importantly, workers' rights. Here, we will discuss every worker's rights on construction sites and how to report unsafe working conditions. In the end, we will have a brief Q&A session. Any questions we don't get to answer tonight will be posted with the presentation for everyone to review. So let's get started with the discussion of our first topic, Local Law 196 of 2017. Due to increased numbers of incidents in recent years, Local Law 196 of 2017 has been implemented. This law requires construction workers to have 30 hours of approved OSHA training to work on a construction site, or have 10-hour OSHA training, 20 hours of approved Department of Building Safety training as well. Please keep in mind, starting on March 1st of 2021, those requirements will be increased to 40 hours. This is a combination of 30 hours of OSHA training and an 8-hour fall protection and a 2-hour drug and alcohol awareness training. Another way to meet these requirements is by taking the 10-hour OSHA training, along with the following DOB-approved safety trainings, which consist of 8-hour fall protection, 8-hour Chapter 33, 4 hours of supported scaffold, 2 hours of drug and alcohol awareness training, 4 hours of general electives, and 4 hours of specialized electives. Local Law 196 identifies who requires safety training. As you can see by the list, construction superintendents, site safety coordinators, site safety managers, competent persons, construction workers are just to name a few. However, I want you to note that employees of DOB licensees and of DOB registrants. If a DOB licensee or registrant has workers accompany them to a construction site and are actively engaged in construction activities, those unlicensed workers must be fully trained to work alongside the DOB licensee and the registrant. Local Law 196 also identifies workers who don't require safety training. That list includes building site owners, developers, project managers and construction managers, delivery persons, flag persons, safety inspectors and consultants, security officers, and service technicians, and those are just to name a few. An excellent example of not requiring training would be to a company that is delivering appliances and are bringing them to a newly finished apartment. This would not be considered part of the construction crew. Local law also requires the issuance of a site safety training card. These cards are needed for all the active sites requiring a site safety professional. A construction superintendent is required to oversee safety on construction sites up to 9 stories. A site safety coordinator is required to oversee safety on construction sites 10 stories and to 14 stories. A site safety manager is required to oversee safety on construction sites of buildings 15 stories and higher. Below is a link of the department's online map that shows active sites with a site safety professional requirement. Anyone can verify if their site requires an SST card. Here, we are showing a few do's and don'ts for our safety professionals. The do's consist of signing the logbook every day, maintaining a presence on the site while work is being performed, designating someone as a competent person in the absence of a construction super. Keep in mind, construction supers are the only ones that can designate a competent person for their site. When a construction super designates a competent person, they need to indicate who specifically is the competent person during their absence in the logbook. They must have them sign and acknowledge that they are the competent person before leaving the site. Please note, the person picked to be the competent person must have the required supervisor's SST supervisory card or the required trainings. We will discuss this in the upcoming slides. Additionally, site safety coordinators and site safety managers are required to maintain a presence during all construction activities. For don'ts, we want to remind you not to forget to sign the logbook. This is very important. It shows you are on site and perform the duties. Construction supers shall not leave the site without first designating a competent person. Construction supers shall not leave the site without documenting who the competent person is taking over for them. These are very important. We can't stress this enough. And the site safety coordinators and managers, again, cannot leave the site during construction activities on their sites. The competent person is an extension of the construction supers in their absence. The competent person should be a worker who will have the ability to identify hazards and the authority to stop unsafe activities. The competent worker must have the required supervisory 62 hours of safety training. Those trainings consist of 30-hour OSHA, 8-hour fall protection, 8 hours of site safety manager refresher in Chapter 33, 4 hours of supported scaffold, 2 hours of drug and alcohol awareness, 2 hours of site safety plans, 2 hours of toolbox talk, 2 hours of pre-task safety meetings, 2 hours of general electives, and 2 hours of special electives. Don't worry, this list can be found on our website and the link will be shown at the end of the presentation. So some do's and don'ts to be aware of if you're selected as the competent person. You need to maintain a safety presence at all times. Stay on site during active construction or wait until you are relieved from duty. Be knowledgeable on the construction activities being performed. Keep up to date on training. Keep up to date on new means and methods. Stop any unsafe activities. Some don'ts for being the competent person are: don't ignore safety regulations, don't leave the site without being relieved, don't be inexperienced or novice, don't be able to not handle the issues that come up, and don't be afraid to report issues or concerns when they're seen. Remember, safety is everyone's priority. Now, Patricia will discuss near misses.
Good evening, all. Thanks, Ozzy. As Ozzy mentioned, we will now discuss near misses. Near misses is one of the first indicators that a job site may need to be more diligent in the safety measures that they are taking on the site. In this section, we will discuss what is a near miss, review case studies of material, equipment, and worker falls, shoring, and roof collapses, which were all preventable. A near miss is an avoidable incident that did not result in any injuries. Most incidents occur as a result of an unsafe act or unsafe conditions. Often, the end result is a person gets injured. Frequently, unsafe acts or hazardous conditions have several misfires, and as a result is a near-miss incident. The only difference between a near miss and an incident with injury or fatality is luck. Near misses are leading indicators in the workplace that must be identified and investigated to reduce overall incidents. If near misses are identified and corrected, future incidents with injuries may be prevented. A material fall near a miss took place in Manhattan on May of 2018. A worker was about 20 stories up on a crane tower. He was hitting a pin and the worker dropped his hammer. His hammer fell, it hit the roof of the delivery truck and bounced off the roof and landed on the sidewalk inches away from the delivery person. Fortunately, no one was injured. However, a few inches in the opposite direction and it could have easily been a fatality. A preventative measure that should have taken place is to tether the tools. Had the worker tethered his tools so that if it slipped, it would have prevented from dropping to the ground. By not tethering the hammer, there was a failure to provide a level of protection to anyone walking below. This is a near miss. A worker fall took place in Manhattan last year. A worker was installing a railing on a crane tie when he slipped and fell off the crane tower. Fortunately, the worker was wearing a personal fall arrest system. The harness and lifeline prevented him from falling to the ground. The other workers lowered the crane and the worker climbed onto the headache wall and was pulled up to the top landing. As you can see now, he's pulling himself up. In this incident, while two workers were hoisting a precast panel, the rope disconnected and fell approximately 15 feet. The load fell because the rope end connection pin did not have a keeper installed. The pin became dislodged, which allowed the rope to disengage from the panel. The crane was hoisting a 12-foot by 16-foot precast panel, weighing 33 tons. It fell to the ground, damaging a trailer on site. When working with heavy machinery, tools, and materials, one of the best ways to prevent an incident from occurring is to inspect them before each use. All ropes should have certification tags showing the capacities. Ensure the equipment and tools used are sufficient for the task at hand and do not use underrated ropes or ropes without tags. Ensure the heavy machinery in use is appropriate for the load being lifted. Check the load capacity chart. Special attention should be given to inspecting connection pins and other mechanisms that are critical to maintaining control of the load. The area around an operating crane is a controlled access zone and specific provisions should be made to protect workers, pedestrians, and equipment that are below. In this near miss, 6 workers were working inside a house and performing interior demolition. A DOB inspector just finished an inspection across the street. He noticed the workers had removed the load-bearing wall supporting the roof. He yelled over and told the workers they needed to get out of the house. As the workers were coming out, the roof started to collapse. A preventative measure would have been to check with a licensed professional before demoing interior walls and follow the demo sequence. In June of 2017, a shoring failure took place. In an effort to cut costs, the contractor chose to use 1 3/4-inch shores instead of the 3-inch shores that were called for in the approved plans. The use of undersized materials caused a shoring failure. 6 workers fell 1 level below when the shoring failed. The corrective measures called for the entire section to be cut out and to redo the work according to the plan. In an effort to save money, the contracting team ended up spending more money. To prevent this incident from occurring, the contractor should have used the materials that was called out for in the approved drawings. At a mall in Brooklyn, at the delivery area on top of one of the stores, a brand new crane was totaled. Initially, the knuckle boom crane was being used with outriggers extended. Close to lunchtime, a delivery truck arrived with roofing materials that could not get around the knuckle boom. The outriggers of the crane were blocking the delivery truck, so the workers withdrew the outriggers. The worker was in a rush and wanted to quickly complete his task as it was almost lunchtime. The worker decided to continue working without re-extending the outriggers. The knuckle boom attempted to lift the load and became unbalanced as the boom was extended with the materials. Since the outriggers were not extended, the crane fell over on its unbalanced side. The crane was relatively new and completely totaled from this incident. The incident could have been prevented if the outriggers were re-extended. Please keep in mind, when a situation changes the operation before continuing, ensure all safety measures and precautions are reestablished when lifting a load. This concludes the near misses, and Ozzy will present the section on construction-related injuries.
Thanks, Patricia. We will now discuss construction-related incidences that resulted in an injury. We will review the incidences that caused them and how they could have been prevented. This will be done through a review of case studies that have been collected. Please keep in mind, every site is different and the preventative measures shown in this presentation may be different for every site. This graph shows numbers from the first half of each year as a comparison. In 2017, we had 635 incidences with 2 fatalities. In 2018, we had 629 incidences with 6 fatalities. In 2019, we had 486 incidences with 5 fatalities, and in 2020, we had 374 incidences with 2 fatalities. As Local Law 196 of 2017 has been promoted, there has been an overall decrease in incidences by a total of 51.5% over the last 3 years. This slide shows data from January through October of 2019. We had 39% in slip, trips, and falls, 36% in struck-bys, 1% in electric shocks, 2% in eye or face injury, 7% in lacerations, 3% in punctures, 4% in miscellaneous injuries, 1% in explosions or burns, and 7% in caught in betweens. Miscellaneous incidents make up 4% of all incidents for this reporting period. This incident happened in Manhattan on February of 2019. Workers had completed the formwork and approximately 50% of the top steel was installed, with a pour scheduled for the next day and another pour in 2 days. Workers set up the 2 generators for lights and equipment below grade level. The poorly ventilated areas allowed fumes and carbon monoxides from the generators to accumulate to hazardous levels. While workers were shoring the formwork, they began to feel ill and were overcome by carbon monoxide sickness and had to be evacuated from the area. A total of 9 workers had to be taken to the hospital, while the 10th worker received treatment at the site. 2 of those workers had to be treated in a hyperbolic chamber. The only openings for ventilation was an elevator shaft, and the 2 generators running under the formwork was not adequately ventilated. Prevention measures for this incident would have included having generators or other equipment that produce fumes should be situated outdoors when possible. If the equipment must be used indoors, then use proper ventilation and monitoring. Air monitoring should take place in confined spaces and other low ventilation areas before starting work. Also, placing engineer control measures to prevent air quality emergencies and carbon monoxide detectors could be staggeredly placed and routinely monitored throughout the site. Carbon monoxide has no smell and can overwhelm a room without warning. Installing and maintaining CO detectors and monitoring yourself for symptoms of carbon monoxide poisoning is the best way to ensure you stay safe in a poorly ventilated area. Signs and symptoms include shortness of breath, headaches, impaired coordination, nausea, vomiting, dizziness, and loss of consciousness. Ventilation is not only important for carbon monoxide, but it's equally important for other gases and fumes. This is another scenario where it is important to ensure proper ventilation when working on an enclosed area. If ventilation is not possible, appropriate PPE should be used. Examples are a dust mask for concrete demolition, a P100 for gases and fumes, and a self-breathing contained device with medical approval for other hazardous areas. This incident happened in Manhattan on October of 2019. The worker was climbing a scaffold with cables in his hands. The live wires came into contact with the scaffolding while the worker was ascending. This caused the worker to get an electric shot to the left side. The worker was taken to the hospital to treat for his injuries. Prevention measures should have included, but not limited to, a daily pre-shift meeting and toolbox talk to review the work and identify the dangers. This toolbox talk needed to be specific to the electrical work and address the means and method to get the job done. Ensure workers are wearing the appropriate PPE. Workers must be trained on the safe operations and the hazards of a piece of equipment before they are allowed to use them. Workers who utilize a scaffold shall participate in a 4-hour scaffolding training. Ensure all electrical switches and components are de-energized before proceeding. This next topic will discuss construction-related incidences that resulted in a fatality. We will review the causes and how they could have been prevented. This will be done through a review of case studies that have been collected. Please keep in mind, again, every site is different and the preventive measures shown in this presentation may differ from every site. This slide is showing percentages of fatalities for 2019. In 2019, we had a total of 12 fatalities reported. That resulted in 25% being caught in between, 58% related to a fall, and 17% related to a struck by. As falls has the lead in our records for fatalities, showing 58%, let's start with a fatality incident case study. This incident occurred in Brooklyn on April of 2019. Workers were working on the roof of a 12-story building and a worker fell off the main roof. This work was being performed without a permit. A safety meeting was not held to go over the scope of work and all the safety hazards. It was noted that the harness was found on the roof and no tie-offs. Workers were not trained for fall protection nor site safety. No railings or fall protections were provided in the work areas. With the lack of safety protocols and the work protection in place, it resulted in the death of a worker. Preventative measures should have included a daily pre-shift meeting and toolbox talk to review the work and identify the danger. The workers should have completed a 30-hour OSHA training, fall protection training, and site safety training. The construction super should have identified the risks for the workers and addressed the concerns. The construction super also should have ensured workers were tied off to an anchor point and ensured guardrails and fall protection measures are in place where appropriate. Last year in the Bronx, work was being performed on a 50-foot pipe scaffold. A worker removed his harness when he came down, then realized his lunch was left up on top of the building. The worker then went back to get his food. He stumbled and fell on the second floor onto the sidewalk, approximately 12 to 14 feet. The worker died from the injury sustained from the fall. There was no design, drawings, nor permits for the scaffold on site. Additionally, there was limited decking and guardrails. Preventative measures should have included, but not limited to, having a daily pre-shift meeting and toolbox talk to identify the scope of work and the dangers present. Ensure all workers have appropriate protective equipment and that it's worn at all times. Harnesses should not be removed while standing on an elevated platform over 6 feet. As a reminder, complacency can cause workers to think that they will never be injured. Please don't take a chance, not even for 1 second. This worker removed his harness for a short amount of time, but ultimately lost his life because of it. In this slide, we are showing the right and the wrong way of donning a harness. Ensure you are wearing the harness correctly. The D-ring should be in the middle of your back, directly between the shoulder blades. Stand up straight and adjust the length of the side body straps as needed to make sure that there is no slack. Fastening the chest straps about mid-chest high and adjust and remove the slack. Make sure the shoulder straps, the leg straps are snug and still allowing full range of motion. Make sure you loosen ends of the straps are tucked into the strap retainer. With your hand held flat, you should be able to fit your fingers underneath your leg strap. This cartoon shows at times we want to get the job done, save ourselves a few seconds, which can lead to an incident. Being able to identify a hazard, whether it's for yourself or a fellow worker, it is important we say something before it happens. This slide shows the manager did just that and imagined how the worker could have potentially fell off. He calls the worker over and talks to him on what can go wrong and recommended the best way to get the job done. The worker listened to his manager, got a man lift to help him change the light bulb. As the worker moved into the next light bulb, the man lift bumped into an object and the worker lost his balance and fell out of the basket. Thankfully, he was wearing a personal fall arrest system and was tied off. Now we will look at caught in between at 25% fatalities. Example of these types of incidents are cave-ins, swing radius of equipment, and construction vehicle pinches. This incident occurred in the Bronx in August of 2019. This is a cold-formed steel building with CMU blocking. An overloaded elevated deck collapsed when the load was placed on it. The front half of the third floor deck fell onto the second floor. The third floor decking was in the framing stage and was not shored and braced against rotation or lateral move where the workers were staged and working. When the CMU was delivered, it was brought up and placed on the unsecured deck. The collapse caused the death of one worker and injured 5 others. Some of those injured were buried in the collapse and had to be rescued. Key prevention takeaways for this incident are, prior to loading the deck, ensure it is properly installed per the manufacturer's and the PE's instructions. We can't stress this enough, as this is a major issue. Never store materials and equipment on floors that are not fully constructed. Prior to placing any load on a deck, verify with a professional engineer. This slide is showing the wrong and the right ways of installing cold-formed steel. Bracing and securing the C-joist is key. When using this material, ensure you are following the approved plans and following manufacturer's recommendations at all times. Just as a reminder, Day 2's presentation on worker safety will cover the cold-formed steel topic as well. Another incident which happened in Brooklyn on November of 2018, where a crane operator refused to move the panels due to high winds. The workers decided to go ahead and move the prefabricated panels with a forklift. The panels were roughly around 8.5 to 9.5 in size and were loaded vertically on the forklift during high wind events. The forklift tipped over and the worker got caught underneath. The crane had already delivered the load on the 4th floor near the edge of the slab. The workers were moving the panels towards the edge of the exterior wall for the installation. The force from the wind on the panels increased the weight, which made the panel heavier and unstable. A worker was guiding the panel near it when the forklift operator lost control and was crushed by the panel. The forklift was only rated for 965 pounds, and the panel weighed over 1,200 pounds, not including the wind force, which led to the panel and the forklift to tip over. Preventative measures for this incident would have included closing the area off with a controlled access zone. Equipment should never have been overloaded with materials. Weather conditions such as wind should be considered when determining safety factors. If the crane operator is unwilling to perform due to the unsafe condition, the operation should not have continued. Materials and equipment should never be moved outside during heavy wind events. Always check load capacities of the winds that will be utilized. Remember, forklift was rated at only 965 pounds and the panel weighed over the 1,200 pounds, not including the force winds. That is an overload that should not have happened and should have been avoided. In this slide, we are comparing proper loading. Ensure the load and the workers are in a safe distance, guiding the load. On the left, the equipment is being properly used and not overloaded. Overloading can cause an incident, as shown on the photo on the right. And lastly, at 17% are struck bys. Examples of these types of incidents are sudden collapse of an excavation or job site, sudden movement of materials or equipment that traps a worker. This incident happened in Manhattan on April of 2019, where a standoff bracket slipped. The C-hook twisted and dislodged the coping stone, striking two workers on a suspended scaffold. Both workers were in the possession of their 16-hour training cards for scaffolding. The two workers were lowering a suspended scaffold platform in order to take their lunch break. The workers were between the 6th and the 7th floor when a piece of the coping stone that was underneath one of the C-hooks fell onto the worker and struck one of them. The struck worker passed away due to his injuries. Because of continued incidents of this nature, the use of standoff brackets in conjunction with C-hooks are no longer permitted as of September 25th, 2019. This can be found on Buildings Bulletin 2019 of number 6. Key prevention takeaways for this incident are a daily pre-shift meeting and toolbox talk to review the work and identify dangers, a periodic inspection to ensure recent installations were performed correctly and do not pose a hazard. Periodic inspections of the work site to ensure that loose materials and equipment are secure and unable to fall and injure workers. Ensure the following of approved plans, setups, or manufacturer's instructions are always followed. This incident occurred in Manhattan in April of 2019. This involved the loading of a 7.5-ton crane counterweight. The counterweight fell approximately 15 feet, crushing one worker and striking another. The counterweight damaged the carrier. The workers were in the process of picking up the counterweight, and the worker failed to remove the extra rope. Looking at the picture, the worker only cleared the 2 bottom ropes of the 3 ropes that are shown in that photo. The 3rd top rope snagged, lifted the lug, and pulled the counterweight off, landing on the worker. There was no radio communication at the time of this incident, and the worker that was crushed did not survive the event. A key prevention takeaway for this incident is the controlled access zone should be set up in the swing radius of the crane and where it may drop a load. Ensure the workers are not standing underneath a load or even near a load where they can be struck. Flaggers should be staged and ensure that the movement is safe. Ensure that all ropes are cleared before lifting. Ensuring a communication method is always in place between the rigging team and the operator. This picture on the left shows the correct method of loading and moving materials. The load is evenly distributed, and there are dedicated workers guiding the moving material. The workers are away from the load and not underneath the load. No other workers are in the picking area. The picture on the right shows the worker in between the load and the equipment and not guiding the load in a safe distance. The material is not being picked from the center, causing it to be unbalanced, hitting the worker. Now, Patricia will lead us into the top violations issue.
As stated, we will discuss the top 10 issued violations and learn the reasons why they were issued and how to prevent them. This slide shows the breakdown of the most issued violations during 2019. The following slides will discuss these violations individually. Failure to safeguard violation is commonly issued after an incident occurs involving an injury to the public or a worker. And this is 19% of our violations. In this incident, the workers were using 2 scraping machines on the roof. They were working in a small area and a section of reinforced concrete slab fell into a classroom below. One worker was riding on one of the scraping machines and another worker was pushing another. The machinery used was too heavy and overloaded the deck as materials were being stripped from it, causing the slab to fall in the classroom below with the worker and the machinery. Failure to safeguard violation is commonly issued after incidents occur involving injury to the public or the worker. Typical reasons for issuing a failure to safeguard violation are controlled access zones are not properly set up or identified, job sites not properly secured to protect the public, not having a flagman when needed, and misuse of equipment, as you can see in this picture. Before placing heavy equipment on a roof or deck, the area should have been structurally assessed to ensure it could carry the additional load. Additional preventative measures should have included a daily pre-shift meeting and toolbox talk to review work and identify dangers. Workers must understand the full scope of work being performed and the risks associated with that work. Approved plans must be followed to avoid the failure of equipment or materials. Professional engineers should have assessed the slab to ensure it can carry the weight of the load. Failure to provide pedestrian protection is the second most commonly issued violation. An example of this violation took place in Brooklyn in September of 2019. The workers were installing metal flashing on the roof of an 11-story building when a piece of metal flashing that was approximately 2 feet long came loose and fell. The piece of metal flashing flew about 15 feet outside of the sidewalk shed and hit a pedestrian in the arm. Pedestrian protection was not completely installed, and neither was a controlled access zone set up. Workers were not paying attention to where they were leaving unused materials, and a piece of flashing fell, hitting a passerby. Failure to provide pedestrian protection is the second most commonly issued violations. Typical reasons for issuing violations are missing construction fence, missing walkways for pedestrians, missing sidewalk sheds. Again, you can see some of these examples in this photo. Sidewalk sheds are temporary structures built to protect people or property. Property owners must install a shed when constructing a building more than 40 feet high, demolishing a building more than 25 feet high, and when danger necessitates this type of protection. To prevent this incident, when removing debris, workers should have been placing it in a designated zone and not placing it in other areas. When tasks are identified at pre-shift meetings, a discussion should take place to ensure that all hazards have been identified and plans should be made on how to mitigate those hazards. Sidewalk sheds and controlled access zones shall be installed anytime work is being performed at an elevated level above the sidewalk. Here are comparison photos of pedestrian protection. The picture on the left shows work can be performed safely on the upper floors as the sidewalk shed is there to protect pedestrians from any mishaps and incidents. The picture on the right does not protect the public. Workers are working directly above passerbys and workers. A controlled access zone with a flagman should have been installed in this instance. Housekeeping is the third most issued violation at 6%. In Brooklyn in February of 2019, a DOB inspector went on site and observed workers standing on top of the supportive excavation inside of a trench. The workers were dropping materials haphazardly. A piece of wood that was thrown about hit another worker on the foot. It hit the worker hard enough that he had to be taken to the hospital. The site did not have a housekeeping plan in place, and the workers were throwing the materials around, not realizing they were creating safety hazards. Poor housekeeping is a leading cause of slips, trips, and falls. The code requires a clear path of ingress and egress at all times. This allows workers to move about freely and safely. It helps to develop and follow a housekeeping plan, clean up as work is being performed, and don't wait until the end of the day to clean up the site. The prevention of receiving a violation for housekeeping is similar to an age-old saying of a place for everything and everything in its place. We are always at risk for slip, trips, and falls. This makes walking safely an important part of every worker's safety practices. The following fall prevention measures can reduce injuries: developing, training, and implementing a housekeeping plan, always maintain a path of egress, clearly mark areas to safely store debris until removal at the end of the day. Here we show another comparison photo. The picture on the left is well organized and there's plenty of space to safely walk. However, on the right, the debris is thrown around unsafely. It will be quite difficult to walk, let alone work without tripping. There's no clear path of egress or ingress. Ensure walkways are clean and in good condition, clean up spills, keep all work areas, passageways, and service areas clean and orderly, avoid stringing cords, cables, or air hoses across any designated aisle. Failure to perform duty is another commonly issued violation. This incident took place in Brooklyn. A worker was buried by a collapsed wall. When emergency personnel arrived, the construction superintendent was not present. The construction superintendent arrived much later into the rescue operation. It took 3 days for rescue operations to recover the body of the trapped worker. The workers shored and braced the existing wall of the building. However, they did not fully shore and brace the underpinning that was exposed due to the over-excavation that took place. It was over-excavated by 14 feet. The bottom underpin started to collapse, which led to the wall collapsing. 25 tons of concrete fell on the worker. One of the violations issued to the site was failure to perform duties. Common reasons why this violation is issued: the site safety professional was not on location at the time of an inspection, the site safety professional did not sign the logbook, the site safety professional failed to designate a competent person, and failure to ensure appropriate safety measures were being followed. Preventative measures that should have taken place for this incident: maintain a site safety presence, follow the approved plans, ensure workers are properly trained in the construction activities taking place: excavation, underpinning, and bracing. Shoring and bracing should have been of the entire wall, not just a portion of the wall. Another commonly issued violation is failure to install guardrails. In May of 2019 in Brooklyn, a worker fell down a shaft when he was preparing to start work. The worker fell 9 feet through the shaft to the cellar floor and suffered a critical injury. The worker was preparing to start masonry work around a stair shaft when he removed the guardrails from the edges of the shaft. There was no other safety measure in place consisting of a controlled access zone or effective fall protection for performing work on a leading edge. The worker was not using a safety harness or an anchor point. The code requires guardrails when working above 6 feet. Guardrails are physical barriers to ensure that workers don't fall into holes or off the leading edge. Common reasons for issuing violations for no guardrails are not in place at the time of inspection, guardrails are not able to withstand 200 pounds of force per code, and any elevated platform over 6 feet where other types of approved fall protection are not in place. Preventative measures to be considered are daily pre-shift meeting and toolbox talk, install guardrails when openings are created, and do not move guardrails when it is in place unless absolutely necessary. In lieu of guardrails, a controlled access zone should be set up and tie-offs should be provided. Ensure workers are wearing appropriate PPE when on site. Ensure all workers are aware of openings with signage and other indicators. On the left, we can see an excavation that has supportive excavation and guardrails. The guardrails are built appropriately with top and mid rails and toe boards. On the right, there is a leading edge with no guardrails, no control, and no controlled access zone is established. Failure to follow approved drawings is also one of the top 10 violations issued. In September of 2019, a contractor failed to construct the guardrail according to the approved drawing, and a worker fell from the scaffolding to the ground. The worker was on the roof of a 3-story building and was working on a parapet when the worker fell in between the scaffold and the facade and landed on the lawn area. You can see it well below. The worker's right leg and both hands were broken. Although the scaffold and sidewalk shed permits were valid and the design drawings were on site, the drawings were not followed during the installation of the scaffold. The scaffolding installed was missing guardrails and planks. Additionally, lifelines were not present. Typical reasons why failure to follow approved drawings are issued: excavation work is performed and appropriate supportive excavation or angle of repose is not constructed per the drawings. We will cover this on Worker Safety D2 presentation. The drawings on site were not specific for that job. Changes were made to the original drawings without going through the required approval process. Preventative measures that could have been implemented are conducting a pre-shift meeting and toolbox talk, always construct scaffolding and other structures according to the approved drawings, ensure the approved plans are on site. If they are not on site, the plans cannot be followed. For this case study in particular, additional fall protection measures should have been in place. Install guardrails when working on elevated surfaces of 6 feet or greater. Workers should wear appropriate PPE. Failure to obtain required training violations do not only pertain to site safety training, but also to training of equipment and machinery. In Brooklyn in July of 2019, an untrained carpenter was using an electric circular saw to cut a piece of plywood. The saw kicked back and the carpenter's left index finger was amputated. As more questions were asked, it was discovered the worker was not trained on how to use the circular saw. The worker was unaware of any potential kickback from the saw. Construction can be an inherently hazardous job. However, the risks can be minimized and eliminated when workers are appropriately trained. Violations for failure to obtain required training are usually issued when failure to ensure each worker has successfully completed the required training, buying training cards on their internet is counterfeit when you didn't receive the proper training. DOB can identify those counterfeit cards. and when workers are not trained on the machinery and equipment that they will be using. Preventative measures can include proper training, as the risks can be minimized and eliminated when a worker is properly trained. Training takes place by attending specialized training classes, but also by receiving daily pre-shift meeting and toolbox talks. At those times, hazards are identified and workers are trained on how to prevent them. Before using machinery and equipment, if you are unfamiliar with it, it is important to be trained on how to use it. This will help prevent an incident from taking place. On the right, workers are being trained on the use of hand tools during a pre-shift meeting. On the left, a worker is using a saw unsafely. This is blatantly not the right thing to do. Most people would not be used as a table saw. However unreal this photo may be, not being properly trained on tools, equipment, and safety requirements will certainly lead to injury. Failure to file false statements is another leading violation that is issued. Typically, in an effort to reduce costs, false statements will be filed. A permit for a particular type of work will be pulled, but in reality, they are performing a lot more than indicated in the permit application. In this instance, a permit was filed for some minor work, but nowhere did it indicate they planned on performing excavation in the backyard of the home. They did not disclose the full scope of work. Common examples of issuing violations for failure to file or filing false statements: permit filed for one type of work while another work is being performed and has no permit, exceeding the scope of work that was filed, certifying drawings or special inspections that have not been performed. Avoiding the violation is preventable. Be comprehensive and detailed when submitting paperwork to the DOB. Specifically for this case, they should have also installed supportive excavation, an angle of repose, or provide a trench box. The final of the top 10 most commonly issued violations is work without a permit. A few months ago in Queens, gut renovation was taking place, but the contractor or homeowner did not apply for the required permits. While the gut renovation was taking place, the foundation walls collapsed. The collapse did not just affect the structure where the renovation was taking place, but also affected the two adjacent homes. This house and the two houses adjacent to it had to be vacated due to potential collapse, due to the removal of the unapproved structural supports while renovating. They did not verify the structural stability of the structure prior to work. There was also a lack of shoring and bracing of the existing wall. A violation was issued under work without a permit. This violation will be issued when work takes place without a permit and/or when unapproved additional work is occurring. Preventative measures include, but are not limited to, ensuring work with a DOB issued permit, or ensure working with a DOB issued permit, reapply for a permit prior to its expiration. If the scope of the work changes, obtain a new permit, verify structural stability prior to commencement of work. Now we will learn more about workers' rights. Workers' rights. We will touch on reporting safety issues, how to protect yourself, and how to report any incidences. First and foremost, workers have the right to a safe workplace. In order to ensure worker safety, workers have the right to receive training and information on hazards and how to prevent them. Workers have the right to review records of work-related injuries and illnesses that occur in the workplace and receive copies of any test results, and copies of the monitoring performed to find and measure workplace hazards. Workers have the right to receive copies of workplace medical records. Workers have the right to participate in an OSHA investigation. And most importantly, workers have the right to report hazards and safety concerns without fear of retaliation. The first step in keeping yourself safe is by being aware of your surroundings and know what is going on around you. It is important for you to know your rights, and one of your rights is the right to work in a safe environment. You can be kept safe by being trained. To name a few, site safety training such as fall protection, scaffolding training, but also training on how to use your tools, equipment, and machinery correctly. If you feel you are working on an unsafe construction site, one that has hazardous conditions that is placing you at risk, you can lodge an anonymous complaint with 311. If you would like to report an incident or unsafe conditions, please call 911 if it is an emergency. If it is not an emergency, please reach out to DOB by calling 311 or call DOB directly at 212-602-0431. If any incidents take place at your site, please notify your site safety professional and your supervisor, if any. Stay at the site until a safety investigator arrives and provides direction. If you would like to learn more about your rights, visit nyc.gov/NYC Safety. For more information regarding worker safety, please go to the link shown. If you have any questions regarding training requirements, please contact the DOB. You can email local law 196@buildings.nyc.gov with your questions. This concludes our presentation on Worker Safety Day 1. Ron, Christian, and Wilson have been answering questions via chat, and we are now going to open the floor to some questions and review some of the most asked questions. A copy of this presentation will be posted, and all questions not answered tonight will be provided for review.
Thanks, Patricia. So as Patricia stated, this concludes our presentation, and we're going to look at some of the questions that have been coming in and seeing if we can pair them up so that we can go over some of them. Okay. Let's see what we have here. Okay, so we're getting a lot of safety card training questions. Okay, so SST cards are required. Yes, so the question was that if SST card requirements are extended to March of 2021. Yes, that is correct. It just recently passed and has been extended to 2021. Let's see what else we have. We have the SST cards have to be present on the site. Yes, your SST card is your identification showing that you have the proper training in lieu of the other trainings that carrying an OSHA card or any of the other trainings that you have, because it does list all your trainings that you have been provided under that SST card. That should always be listed and have with you at all times. Let's see what else we have. Some of the questions are still being answered and I don't want to trump them. So can a professional engineer perform as an SSM? So the PE can perform as an SSM as long as they have the SSM certification, as long as the SST card supervisor card is obtained as well. All workers at the jobs are required to have the OSHA education trainings a part of them. So just keep that in mind. We do certify SSM, so you have to have the certification and the license issued through us. The presentation is going to be posted online. That's one of the questions I've noticed. that we're getting, and they are going to be posted online. We're also in the process of translating the questions into multiple languages so that other workers who have issues with reading English would have an opportunity to read and have these also as well as a reference. So as far as the time frame, I'm not sure the exact time they will be posted. However, the PowerPoint presentation and the video will be posted on our website. I'm just not sure the exact day and time that that will be happening. Let's see what else we have. Oh, actually, a lot of these questions are mostly the same. So housekeeping plans, yes. There are no housekeeping plans that are required by law. We may mention of a house cleaning plan as best practice, and just keep that in mind that it's something that should be well attended to ensure worker safeties and site safety throughout the job itself. If you look at Chapter 33 in the building code, it does talk about general good safety practices that should be followed. So keep that in mind. We're not going on site to look for an actual site safe, housekeeping plan, but it is good practice to have one and ensure that everyone working on the site knows where they're dumping the garbage, where they're moving materials, where things are being stored, and keeping the aisles clear and free. Let's see what else we have. Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. All right. So the DOB have a list of contractors and safety records of said contractors? Yes, we do. You can check, I believe, on our website. If not, we'll definitely update you on that question. And when we get all the answers for a lot of these questions that are being posted up, they will be part of this presentation for everyone to view on our website. Okay, let's see which other one. That was answered. That one, okay. And not seeing anything else coming along other than housekeeping and SST cards. Again, the questions that are coming in for, okay, a follow-up question on the OSHA cards. Here's another one. Just got an SST card today and my OSHA card received on 2016. SST cards indicate that the SST will expire on 2025. Right. So when you have an expiration on your SST card, those are when they would be due to renewal, even though the rule is coming in on March of 2021. There's no need to update it at this point in time at the moment, unless otherwise indicated on our websites. Right now, those are not expired and we should not have to worry about that as well. You see another one that we can answer? That one was answered there. So, okay, let's see. You answered that question. I don't see any other questions coming through. So we're going to give it another minute or two, see if there's any other questions that come through that haven't been answered through the team in the back. Again, questions are still being answered. If you have a question in Spanish, you can definitely answer it, ask it, and we'll be answering those also as well. Those are not showing up on my dash at the moment, but I know I see a couple of number of questions that are being answered. So we're going to give it a few minutes and we'll see if any other questions come in. Again, yes, the PowerPoint presentation will be posted and be available for everybody on our website. I'm not sure of the exact day, so that would be a good thing. All right, great. I'm not seeing anything else unless this is slowing down a little bit, but okay, so I think another one just came in. Let's answer this. Do the local law requirements apply to small jobs without a super, like an apartment renovation come March 2021? I believe that 1 to 3 family houses and minor alteration work being performed under 50% of the total floor area do not require SST trainings. However, on our website, we do have all the rules and the regulations on local law 196 of 2017. A lot of those questions and answers are part of the FAQ that are there and posted. Feel free, again, if you look at the website, and I'm actually gonna go back to that slide so that everyone can actually have it as a reference. Go to our website. You can see safety page training that we can see. I'm putting it up now. You go to that website. That's the main safety page where you can click through and you can see a lot of the other safety questions and concerns that come up, not only with safety training and other safety parameters or within work, but also other great information that can be utilized to understand. Okay, I guess that's all we have. I'll give it one more minute and then questions that are not answered here that are still being answered in the back will be posted. So you'll definitely have answers for all the questions. A lot of them will be truncated into the same question and answer just to make life a little easier so we're not repeating it on the FAQ. Thank you. I appreciate the comments and the compliments. Both Patricia and I actually enjoyed giving this presentation. And again, there's still an opportunity to sign up for day 2. And as well as sign up for that because we're also going to be discussing other topics and a short overview of some of the slides and topics that we've discussed today. So there's still time to sign up, I think up into right before it starts. So please sign up if you haven't signed up yet for that presentation. It's going to be another good one to listen to. All right, great. So as seeing no other questions that I can answer at the moment that haven't been answered on the back end at the moment in time, again, all the questions and answers are going to be posted and uploaded, and the presentation will be posted on the website. Again, we hope to see you also tomorrow for the second presentation. We'll be discussing co-form steel, fault protection, controlled access zones, and excavations and trenches as well. So we will still discuss worker safety tomorrow as well, but those topics will be discussed tomorrow. So please join us and we hope to see you tomorrow. Thank you, everyone.